Today we're going to tackle something a little bit different on my SN95 Mustang. When I indicate, the bulb doesn't come on. So I think I've traced it back to this thing, which is the combination switch behind your steering wheel. So if you have an indicator problem, consider doing this job yourself at home. All right, let's go. So let me quickly show you the way I managed to trace this back to that indicator switch. Okay, so I've got the key on, and when I indicate left, everything's fine, but when I indicate right, I get a fast blink, and sure enough, if we look outside, my rear bulb is not on, whilst my front ones are completely fine. Now, strangely enough, I have checked that rear bulb and it is actually not burnt out, and I've even swapped the bulb out, and the same thing happens when I indicate right. That bulb does not come on. When I jiggle this around sometimes, it almost makes contact and the bulb starts illuminating again. So it's got to do something with the contacts in here, whether they're dirty or just worn out. I'm sure that that isn't normal and could probably be a lot better. So the name of the game today is to swap this thing out. I've had a look at water intrusion in the car. Some of the seam welds crack over time and water comes up through the bottom of the floor. But the wiring for that indicator stalk runs through this channel over here. And from what I can tell, everything is nice and dry in there. So I'm fairly certain it's not the bulb. I'm fairly certain it's not the wiring or any water intrusion. So fingers crossed. The only thing remaining is this combination switch. As you can see, my steering wheel is on the wrong side for most parts of the world because this is an Australian delivered SVT Cobra. The bolts I'm going to touch, the things I'm going to remove will be the same for you, even if you sit on that side of the car when you're driving. Alright, so let me show you the tools you're going to need.
Alright, get yourself a Phillips head screwdriver ready. You want a long one so you can reach into some places, a flat blade screwdriver for prying, a ratchet and extensions, a T20 and a T50 socket, an 8mm and a 13mm socket, a steering wheel pulley kit, and an 8mm spanner.
So before you do anything else, pop the bonnet and undo your battery. Let the car sit for about 10 minutes, and what that will do is it will allow the airbag to completely discharge of any electricity, and that way when you touch it, hopefully it won't explode and kill you today. So once you've let that rest for a few minutes, take a tiny little screwdriver and an 8mm socket, and let's get this airbag out. So to start with, just pry out these little tabs over here. There it goes. It might go flying, but yeah, just make sure you don't lose that. So within here, you'll find an 8mm bolt, and it will be the same on the other side. So just there. So once you've got these bolts out, this thing is fairly easy to remove. You just pull it forward like so, and within here you will find a clip that you need to undo, and there's a prong just in there. So once you've got that out, just put it in a safe place somewhere. So the next thing we're going to need to do, basically remove the steering wheel. Grab yourself a T50 socket. Just put that in here. So just hold the wheel while you undo this. And there it goes. And once it's cracked, you could literally remove this by hand. Just unscrew it. And there it is. So next, this wheel will be on your steering column quite tightly. And if you start pulling and yanking on this thing, banging it and whatnot, you might actually damage the steering column itself. So if you can, definitely get yourself a steering wheel puller kit. So this section here goes in the middle into this middle hole over here, and we'll be pressing against your steering column. Now what I like to do is put a washer on the end of this so that it's not pressing on the thread of the steering column here and potentially ruining the thread. So this washer just basically sits on top of the column and is the thing that this bolt will be pushing against. Now once you've got that positioned in the middle like so, you simply have to wind in the 2 bolts, one here and one there. But there is another little trick that I like to do. I like to place a socket on these bolts, put it through like so, and then this bracket doesn't have to come all the way up here before it takes purchase on this bracket. So you simply bolt these in, and just careful, this is alloy, so just careful that you don't cross thread this by accident, but wind it down all the way so that you've got full purchase on the wheel like so. It will bottom out, you don't need to tighten this up. And then take your second one, put a same length socket on the end of that and wind this in as well. Just double check them. Yep, and they're level, so that's good. So put the little washer in there and then start winding the tool down into the steering column. So as you do, this comes towards you, this bracket comes towards you like so. Just make sure everything is nice and straight before you go any further. Okay, so now that that's on, you will feel it firm up. So now this thing is not moving, not budging. So then all you've got to do, this bolt will be different for you probably, but you get a socket, or whatever size socket this is. So for me, that's a 16. And then simply take a ratchet and start winding on it. And as this tightens up, it will pull the wheel away from the column. And there it goes. I can now feel it loosening, so much so that I can wind this by hand even and take out the steering wheel puller. And now my steering wheel is completely loose. Now, before you can remove the steering wheel, you just have to undo just through here. This wiring needs to be removed. So take a little screwdriver and just pry off. All right, so once you've got that loose like so, all you've got to do is unclip it. There's a little tab just there. So pull back on that and the whole thing should separate like so. All right, so now that these two are loose, you should now have no problem pulling this wheel off. There we go. Okay, so with the steering wheel out of the way, the next thing we'll need to do is remove this plastic cover to get to the combination switch. Now, to remove this plastic cover, we'll actually first need to remove this over here so we can get to all the screws. So let's do that. Grab yourself a small plastic screwdriver and just pry it in there. Undo all of these clips just like that, and you will also have a couple of bolts in there which are 10 mils, so just undo those as well. So with that kick panel out of the way, you're ready to remove these little screws over here that hold this bottom bracket on. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so to remove this top cover next, what you've got to do is remove the key chamber first, but it won't come out. So there is a trick to removing this. If you look underneath in here, can you see it just there? There is a small ball bearing just there. So what you've got to do is take a screwdriver and push a screwdriver into that small crevice to push the ball bearing in, but it won't go in just on its own. So what you have to do is put the key into the ignition and turn it on, and now it will allow you to push this ball bearing in like so. So that's in, and then you will be able to slide out this key barrel like so. So what you're doing is you're pushing this small ball bearing just there in with a screwdriver, and it will allow you to pull this out completely. So just put that away in a safe place. And now this top cover, what I'm going to do is just quickly loosen the steering column underneath. So not much to it really. There's just a couple of bolts that hold everything on. So I'm just going to loosen those to allow this steering column to drop down a little bit so I can take this out. So all you're really going to need is a 13mm socket. So now we've got a little bit more room. Hopefully we can take this off. Alright, from here on out things are pretty simple. You've got 1 and 2 screws, 1, 2, and what you need is a T20 to get those undone. So that's the second one. So with those removed, now someone has already been in here for my car, because as you can see this little tab here is broken. In fact, I found it loose just in there, both of them broken off. But essentially what you want to do next is pry up these little tabs and wriggle this large connector free like so, and then you've got another one just there. Now again, 2 tabs, 1, 2, top and bottom. The best way to do this is just use a small screwdriver, get underneath it. There you go, nice and brittle. So get ready to break these. Wow, I didn't break one. That's a miracle. So I'm hoping that this new one will improve things somewhat. Let's find out. So to put things back is pretty much just a reverse of what we've done. So clip your fasteners back on. That's 1. And that's 2, so they're back in. And they're in there quite firm. I don't think these will work themselves loose. So I'm quite okay with those broken clips being the way they are. These aren't going anywhere. So take your little T20s and put them back in. Just check the mechanics, make sure they work fine. That all seems good, everything's in. Next, we'll take the top cover and put it back on. So now that the back cover is back in place, we can retighten the steering column underneath. So take your 13mm and tighten up the 4 bolts. Okay, with those 4 bolts tightened back up, your steering column now should be nice and firm. No more jiggles. So we're ready to put the ignition back in. So this is quite simple. You just slide it in basically. Like so. Make sure it all works. Yep. Nice and tight. Next, we're going to reattach the bottom cover with the 4 Phillips head screws. Okay, the cover is back on, nice and tight. So next, we reattach the bottom plate. So now at this point we're ready to put the steering wheel back on the car. All you really need to do is feed these 2 back through the hole over here, just like so. This is your clock spring. Realign the steering wheel like so. Clip this back in together and then reattach this clip. So that's back in. This is your airbag. Before we put the airbag back on, we're going to put the steering bolt back in. Just going to tighten that up. Nice and tight. Cool, that's not going anywhere. Okay, time to put the airbag back on. So at the back here, we'll just reattach this brown clip. That one goes in there. And then the airbag goes back on the car. And there it is. Okay, so now the only thing left to do is to reattach the 8mm that go on either side. Clips go back on. There we go. And you're done. Time to put the battery back on. And now that the battery is back on, it's time to turn the car back on. Now, when you do, just make sure you're in neutral, of course. Get out of the way of the airbag and just prime your vehicle. Just turn it on and let it initialize. Just let it sit there for a good 30 seconds. And once you're happy with that, look at that, right, left, right. So if you recall, this is the side we had the problem with. And as you can see, my rear indicator is now working. So it is a strange one. That indicator stalk can affect the indicators, the front and back of your car. And it must have something to do with the wiring within the switch itself. But having swapped that out, we're now good to go. So there you go, guys. I hope you found that video useful, informative, entertaining even. But in any case, I hope that helps you out. It was a bit of a weird job. I've never really encountered this on any other car that I've had before, where the combination switch has caused the blinkers not to work. Yeah, I can only imagine that over 20 years of use, some dirt or crud has gotten into the contacts of that combination switch. But in any case, it's a quick and easy job. May take you a couple of hours at the most, and it will have you back on the road without much trouble at all. And you definitely want to fix something like that, because obviously indicators are a safety item. I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please give this video a like. And if you'd like to see more content like this, where I work on cars at home in my own garage, much like you could, then please click subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post up something new. But enough chit chat from me. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, go ahead and try this on your car.